Hello, my name is Jeffrey Palermo, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to expand an Entity Framework core object and mapping to include a new property. And this will include expanding our SQL Server table schema so that that new property is saved as a field in our database. This is important because as we are developing applications, we make modifications to the data structures and database schemas all the time. And it's important that we do some specific things in order to keep that compatible with a DevOps process and automated builds and deployments, including automated testing. So what we have on the screen is a simple expense report form. We're going to add an amount. And if I go to Visual Studio, we can see in our user interface, we can see the view that would have a new amount field. And we can see the controller that is very simple. There's nothing we need to do here because we're model binding to the expense report, and then we're just pushing it down to the application. If we go to the expense report class, we can see that we have already added an amount property, but of course it's non-functional. And so in order to get it round trip to the database, we actually need it to be in our database, and it is not at present. So instead of just adding it, we're going to do it in a test-driven development way. And so we're going to modify the arrange section of our test. There's nothing that we'll have to do for the act part of our test. And then we'll modify the part of the assert part of the test. So if we were to add the amount, and we can just, in this test, set it to $1, and this is a decimal, then we'll come and assert that it is the same as what we set it to. So amount should equal amount. Okay. Now, if I run this test, here we go. Let's go ahead and run the test. What it's going to do is fail because obviously we don't even have that in our database. And so we'll see, we can be driven by the exception, by the error that it throws to us. But we are going to modify the Entity Framework core mapping, and we're also going to add this add amount as a column to the database. And so while this test is running, we'll have to wait for it. There we go, it failed. And it said an error invalid column name amount, which is exactly what we expected. So let's go ahead and add it to our database table. So we'll go ahead and view the designer. This is going to be a decimal or a money column. So let's go ahead and add it here. Amount, and it's going to be money. And we'll let it be null for now. Okay, so we'll go ahead and update. There we go. We just need to update the database in this case. We won't be generating a new script. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, while that's doing it, let's go over to our Entity Framework core mapping, which is inside our data access project because we have our layers separated it out. So expense report map, what we need to do is we need to add a new line, and it'll be mapping.property. Now, Entity Framework can infer or guess as to what the mapping might be, but that requires the reader of the code to know what it's going to guess. And it's always good practice to make things explicit so that the maintainer of the code doesn't have to guess. So amount, and we're going to say that it is not required. And so that we can just leave it off if it's not required. And that's about all we'll do. So we're going to come back to the tester class, and let's go ahead and run this test again. You can see it failed before. So let's go ahead and run it. And as it's running, it's actually inserting a record into the database called test expense. This is an expense. The number is 123. It's canceled status, and the amount is going to be $1. And after this runs, which you can see it did in fact pass, after it runs, we're going to come over to our table. We're going to view the data, and then we will see that we actually have a record with the amount of, actually we need to close this because we need to refresh it. And let's view the data one more time so that we have the amount column. There we go. The amount of $1 with our new column. And that is how we add a new database column and property with the Entity Framework Core mappings. And our next step will be adding it to the screen and modifying our ASP.NET MVC application. So I'm Jeffrey Palermo, and that was how to add a new column on a persisted class.